Well, welcome to the Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm joined by my good buddy and my co-host Brian Gill. And I am so excited today to have Jayme and Morgan Snellgrove, friends of mine from here in Mobile that are now living not in Mobile but are joining us over Zoom. They were members at the church that I get to serve at, the congregation that I serve at here in Mobile. Morgan is a math professor still at the University of Mobile. And Jayme is I guess a traveling nurse would be fair to say. Now you've been being a nurse.
We prefer the term nurseman. Thank you.
Nurseman. Nurseman. I like it. We'll go with nurseman.
I'm trying to get that to take off.
No. A little traction. Hashtag nurseman. All right, there we go. Hey, the Snellgroves are adventures along with their Rhodesian Ridgeback, Snooky.
Hey, yeah. She's sitting over there.
She's sitting over there quietly. Yeah, I love Snooky. They're currently living down in Tampa, and they've adventured around on their sailboat, which we're going to get to talk about. But in 2020, which seemed like forever ago now, Hurricane Sally makes landfall in Gulf Shores, Alabama, finding the Snellgroves anchored down, and it passed graciously over, leaving them unharmed. And we're going to hear about the story of you guys surviving Sally, as it were. And so thanks so much for taking time to join us, y'all.
Yeah,
glad to be here.
Happy to see some Mobile face, or a Mobile face. We've really been missing Mobile a lot lately.
Yes.
So
I was happy to see when you got on that little Redbeard shirt from our good buddies at Redbeards here. Yeah, that's awesome.
We've got one of their burgees, one of their flags, for the sailboat. We're going to have to fly it high when we get to some cool places.
There you go.
This episode of the Storied Outdoors is brought to you by Redbeards.
Sponsored by. That's awesome.
We got quite the t-shirt collection from them.
Yeah.
Hey, they have so many great ones too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about this. Tell us about your boat. I know that living on a sailboat is not something that I know. I can actually say that aside from you two, I know zero people living on a sailboat. First of all, does your boat have a name? And then second of all, just tell us what that's like. Just walk us through a day or a week in the life of living on a boat.
Well, constantly changes.
Yes.
So our boat, I'll do the technical info.
Well, first of all, the name of it is Achilles, which comes from Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
So the mythical healing plant that is used to heal Frodo, and he's really into Lord of the Rings, so he can be a little bit more descriptive.
Yeah, it's Atlas, or Kingsfoil is the healing plant that Aragorn uses. He heals Faramir, he heals Éowyn, and he also heals Frodo when he first gets stabbed by the ring rat. It's a beautiful part of the story, and it's described as like this invigorating vapor mist that drives away the forces of evil, these wraith forces. So I always loved that part of the story. And it talks about that Aragorn's the king that's coming back into the throne, and it says the hands of the king are the hands of a healer. And that's one of the prophecies that shows Aragorn's coming back into his kingship. Right. I always loved that. And when we were deciding on names, I wanted it to be a Lord of the Rings name, and that's the one we decided on.
Is that metaphorical for the boat that brings you guys healing? Is that what it is?
It definitely does protect. It does protect us in a lot of situations. It's weird because it's capable of being very calming and very enjoyable, but it can be very scary at times.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, but the boat itself is a 35-foot sailboat. It's a boat builder, Freedom Yachts. It's a little unique for a sailboat in that it doesn't have most sailboats. You have the mast that goes up, and you have rigging that comes down to the sides of the boat, and that's kind of what gives the boat its rigidity and how you inevitably how you actually sail the boat is by having all that standing rigging. Our boat doesn't have any standing rigging. It's got a freestanding carbon fiber mast. So it's basically, there's no shrouds, no rigging or anything like that. So it's for a 35-foot boat, it has a lot of room and has a lot of space on the deck. And that's one of the reasons we really fell in love with the boat. And it's easy to sail. The sail plan is very simple, very forgiving. And we've learned a lot, since we bought it.
I mean, carbon fiber, coming from a cyclist, carbon fiber does not flex. So that's what makes it strong, because it's carbon fiber. Am I right in that?
Right. Well, it's a yes and no in this particular usage. It's so rigid, but it does flex. So like the top of our mast, if we get into a really strong blow, it actually will fade over a little bit. So it softens that motion, which is the things we like about it, actually. It's a very, 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 very good boat, and it's taken us through. We've been through a lot on it. I mean, honestly.
Well, living on a boat, I mean, obviously it comes with its hazards. Living on a boat on the Gulf Coast certainly comes with its hazards. We talked about in the introduction, we talked about Hurricane Sally. What are some other things you guys have experienced on that? Because you guys have experienced a lot.
Oh my goodness. How long is this podcast?
It's free form. Whatever. We make the rules.
Our engine has broken down in the ICW in front of a giant barge full of coal. Our engine
also under a bridge.
Our engine broke down in front of a bridge.
Need a little wind here.
Yeah.
It broke down coming up in between Dolphin Island and what's the island next to it? Pettit
Boy Island.
Yeah, we were kind of in between, and that was the first time it died, and that was us bringing the boat over from Louisiana.
We fixed that problem. Our engine hasn't broken down since those three times.
So there was an issue with dirty diesel, and people kept telling us just keep changing the fuel filter, it'll work itself out. But it kept. But the problem is that happens when the boat's kind of being shaken, which is usually in a hairy situation. So when it's picking up that gunk and your engine dies at those times, it's quite bad. You have to quickly get the anchor down and stop the boat, or get sails up. It depends on the situation. So
I think we wound up actually counting it up. We've been through like 6 or 7 named storms on the boat in some form or another.
Well, just 2020 alone, we were in the cone like 7 times, and we were affected almost 5 or 6 times, like not direct hits every time, but felt the impacts of just in 2020.
We woke
that
up
many.
We woke up one night and a tornado came over us.
I remember that.
That was insane.
The tornado hit the marina, and we got in our car and rode it out under Dog River Bridge.
Oh my goodness.
It was a very interesting crowd. So
I'm sure there were some colorful people underneath the bridge.
I kid you not, a man came out in a one suit, like Navy jumpsuit.
Like what, a mechanic, I guess?
Yeah, mechanic suit type thing. With a tarp over his shoulder and a machete like this long. Like it looked like we were at a Halloween
I was like,
haunted house.
Lock.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, there was a tornado.
And we watched the tornado come straight over.
Yeah.
We were like, it didn't seem like it was that bad because we were tucked under this bridge. But when we drove back out to get to the boat, which is, 1/8 of a mile away, there were boats everywhere. Trees were down. There was like boats across the road.
The ones that were on land. The ones in the yard seemed mostly okay. There were a couple that got sails ripped and demasted. But the ones that were like on trailers or stands in the yard, they were knocked over, and the roof of the marina was ripped off and stuff. So it was a significant little breeze.
I would like to say, as a caveat, for every terrible experience we've been through on the boat, we've been through some of the most like crystal clear, just beautiful experiences of our lives. I mean, it has when people ask what living on a sailboat is like, especially if you really use your boat, it takes your good and your bad. You just get rid of everything in between. So you either got great or terrible, and there's no in between. So it can be really, really fun. It can be really, really scary, but it's the combination of those two that I think is what makes it so fun. The challenge of it, going through stuff that's difficult and getting to enjoy the enjoyable parts, really makes them a lot more.
And I would also say it's probably like 10% the really terrifying and 90% much less terrifying. So the pros do outweigh the cons. So, or else you'd really just not be able to solve.
Yeah.
But
it's not like that.
That makes a great story.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, as you know, I'm working at Mars Hill, trying to keep up with people. 2020 was a crazy year anyway. And so trying to keep up with folks. And then we watch the Weather Channel here in Mobile. We keep our eyes on it. The rest of the world is kind of oblivious to hurricane season, but man, we know right when it cranks up. And of course we see Sally coming. And so I remember texting with you guys a good bit. And initially Sally's supposed to go into like Mississippi somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Texas,
you guys
line.
That's right.
Or not Texas, Mississippi.
It was Mississippi,
it was
Alabama.
like Louisiana, Mississippi, somewhere over there.
Yeah, whatever. We don't know no land states.
Land states.
West.
At any rate, it was supposed to be on the other side of us. And so you guys walk us through when you guys see, that little notification pop up on the phone. Walk us through what was that decision making process like. And then ultimately kind of the story of Sally for y'all.
Well, I would say when we were at Mobile Yacht Club at this time, and everybody, when it's hurricane season, everybody's out at their boats, wrapping things, taking things down, doubling up lines, all that kind of stuff going on. And they keep just moving that track more and more to us. So we were just watching it for a while. And this one was particularly hard because it was developing in the Gulf. It wasn't like it was developed way out and then was moving our direction. It was forming and they had no idea where it was really going to go. So
it's hard to track that one.
Yeah, when they form in the Gulf, and as slow as this one was, it's so hard to pin it down. So when we started seeing the cone really coming over into the Mississippi-Alabama line, that was when everybody at the club started thinking this might not be good, And so, but we were on still the east side of the storm, and we were taking a very close to direct hit. And so it looked like there was a high chance of it just centering Mobile Bay from what they were saying on the Weather Channel. So
I love how everybody becomes meteorologists too, by the way, right?
Oh yeah.
Everybody in Mobile turns into meteorologists.
Oh my gosh, everybody's an expert. I don't know where these folks are hiding their crystal balls, but they'll swear up and down they knew what it was going to do, Yeah. And so, but yeah, so people at the club, and these are like veteran sailors. I mean, Coast Guard, very experienced people, had boats for years and years. And they're thinking we need to head east, is what was kind of a general consensus amongst a group that we were, good friends with. And it made sense. We would be leaving the hurricane warning, going into the tropical storm warning, and we're not fast enough to get completely out of it, but we could lessen it, was what that plan was originally supposed to do. So there was 4 boats.
Yeah, there was two big power boats. They're called trawlers.
Yeah.
They're basically shaped like a giant shoebox, but they're big power boats. And then another sailboat, a 40-foot sailboat that left with us. So it was the 4 of us that essentially decided, well, it looks like, at that point, we really thought it was going more towards Mississippi, Louisiana, when we were making this decision. Mm-hmm. And so everybody was like, let's go east. So we joined in and we started heading that way.
Yeah. So they all seemed to feel like Ingram's Bayou was a great place to ride this out. Yeah. And at that point, it did look like a good place to ride it out.
And it was a place where we were very familiar with Ingram's Bayou. We spent several trips there, anchored out for several days.
It's a fun weekend trip.
It's a beautiful place. Mm-hmm. It's over near Alberta. So it's basically in the middle of nowhere.
Like, if you know Pirates Cove.
Yeah.
It's one cove over.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm familiar with that area down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Pirates Cove is in Roberts Bayou. And if you go one cove or inlet back toward the west, that's Ingram's Bayou.
Mm-hmm.
So really cool place.
Yeah. So, but It's a known hurricane. It's been a popular spot for storms for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So for folks that don't live down here and don't know what a hurricane hole is, what do you mean when you say hurricane
It's
hole?
a good place to anchor and put a boat for a hurricane.
Yeah.
So it's got
Yeah.
a very narrow opening, and then it's not that big of a space back up in these. Basically, it's almost, like being in a lake.
Yeah.
So it's very protected by land on all sides.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's shallow enough to where you can anchor and have a lot of scope, which means a lot of anchor line out, a lot of chain out.
Mm-hmm.
You could really get a good strong anchoring setup.
And the holding,
it's
is good.
Holding. It's like mud, so your anchor is like completely dug in.
So, did you guys make it over there before it shifted direction?
We actually sailed through our worst thunderstorm on the way there.
Yeah.
So we had to get down Mobile Bay, which this was another thing that we learned, kind of a hindsight thing. Because another friend of ours that lives on a boat in the same like Dog River area, they went north and they went up the Mobile River into Dead Lake.
Yep.
We did not know that, or we didn't think we could make it there in time. It's a long trip, and sailboats don't motor quickly, especially up a river against a current.
Right.
So we thought, we're not going to get there in time. We don't want to be stuck somewhere. So that was the other kind of decision that we had to make, was go north or go south.
Mm-hmm.
And with hitting the coast, go north would probably be better. That we were nervous to try for it.
Go ahead and establish this point early in the storytelling. I think with a boat, one of the things that's really difficult, because even after we went through Hurricane Sally and I came back to work and I came back to church and things like that, people were like, oh my goodness, why did you guys get caught in the storm? Why didn't you go another way? With the sailboat, things happen so much slower.
Mm-hmm.
You're moving 5-6 miles per hour.
Yeah, I mean it's not a fast thing.
That's it.
And you're moving everything, and once you get set and settled, it's difficult to move the boat safely in a lot of situations. Mm-hmm. So you have to make a decision, and you have to stick to it. You try and prepare as much as you can, right. But once we essentially got to Ingram's Bayou and we put the anchor down and we had really good holding and we knew we were in a safe spot, in a spot that we were familiar with, we just decided to wait, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, about the thunderstorm though that you asked about, that was the strongest thunderstorm we ever sailed through. So there was already storms rolling in off of the system Sally, and we could see the clouds. So we're in Mobile Bay for that. We could see the clouds rolling in. And so we went ahead and we decreased our sail area. So, which is called taking a reef. So we reefed our sail and got it down as small as we could to keep it powered up. We, just batten down the hatches, and it was probably, upper 30s in the knots. We do knots on winds. So what would that be? Maybe like
close to 40
mile per hour wind.
Sustained winds.
So it was gusting higher than that. So that was sustained, and lots of lightning, super heavy rain. We just had to sail in the direction that made the boat handle it the best. So we kind of had to turn off of our direction that we wanted to go in and just sort of ride it out till it passed over.
It was crazy.
And passed you and got in. And
that's something else to keep in mind too. From Dog River, which is where we had the boat docked at the time, to get to like Bon Secours Bay on the southeast side of Mobile Bay, it's like 27 miles, which it could take us anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, depending. It really depends on if we're sailing, how much wind we have. So
the direction of the wind, if we can sail directly there or if we have to zigzag.
So you're thinking about 4 or 5 hours that you have. So you're taking in consideration, are we going to be able to make it before it gets dark? What time we're going to be hitting that, and that's hitting the ICW, which leads up to Ingram's Bayou. So it's not just like you can think, oh, all of a sudden, let's leave. We'll get there in 40 minutes, like you're hopping in your car. It's a different mindset.
And the conditions were deteriorating quickly. Like it was 3 days before the storm hit, and it was already
Oh yeah.
Very bad. Like, not that the Coast Guard was putting out,
Yep.
we're putting boats in storage. You're on your own till safe conditions,
Wow. So
you have to make a decision quick.
when you're sitting there and you know that it's coming, you guys realize you're going to get hit. Did the eye go over you guys, or were you on one side or the other? I mean, what is that like, being in the eye, like a literal eye of the storm?
So
it happened in the middle of the night, so we couldn't see too terribly much of like the actual like looking up through the hole, but you knew the second you passed into it.
Yeah.
The winds went from triple digit to 10.
Yeah.
And
oh my goodness.
it was instantaneous.
So again, to provide a little bit of context, when everyone said that they were going east, the people we were talking about, again, experienced boaters, but we thought it was going much, much farther, landing much farther west.
Yeah.
So even when they said, hey, we're going to go have a hurricane party. We're going to go hang out here, and we didn't think it was going to be bad. I mean, honestly, but we thought it was still smarter to go east. Well, when we got to Ingram's Bayou, first off, we got there in the middle of the night, and through the night we stayed farther out of the inlet, and then when the sun rose the next day, we moved way farther into it.
Right.
So we essentially had 360 degrees. Trees were all around us,
and the water was already rising. So
Yeah.
we were actually able to get further back up in the bayou than we normally could, depth wise. So we tucked back just about as far up into it as you could get.
Yeah, and it was about this time that it was
there were tons of boats in there, and it was just all day more boats coming in. Nobody had time to do very much, and so it was just boat after boat after boat trailing in, and the smaller ones could go further back, and and then we saw in the opening of the bayou there was like an 80-foot like mega boat mega yacht out there.
Wow.
That rode the storm out. There was this massive trawler in there with us, probably 50-60 feet. Our friends were in there, like at last count, for what we could see before it got too dark, there were about 20 boats in there. So it was, and there were people on most of them.
Yeah.
And so, which we never like contacted any of the other boats. It'd be an interesting thing to meet somebody that rode that same storm out in there, because everybody went through the same thing, but we never met. So, which everybody left. No boat that was in there
took any
real damage.
Yeah,
everybody left. And the two marinas on both sides of us were totally destroyed. And boats sank.
Yeah, I mean, like literally within a quarter mile south of us, the hurricane just wiped out Barber Marine.
I would say Barber Marine was just right across from us.
Devastation, man.
Total.
But with the hurricane, the Hurricane Center, they update their forecast every 6 hours or 4 hours?
I think 4 hours.
So yeah, every 4 hours. I mean, we're counting down. It's like, hurricane update,
and it was just a little closer every time.
And of course,
a little closer.
Yeah, you could see the little dot where we were in the hurricane course, and every 4 hours it was just closer to us, and then it became apparent that we're about to take this storm head on.
Dead on.
Dude, I was so worried about you guys because I'm watching it thinking, oh my gosh, it's going closer to where Jayme and Morgan are.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like we moved and it just followed us. So, we had to try too and save our cars. So,
golly, that was
another part of the story.
A whole other thing. So our cars are sitting at Dog River
Mobile Yacht Club.
At the Mobile Yacht Club, and I'm thinking our cars are going to get flooded.
Yeah.
We were even thinking it was going to hit on that side of the bay. So my main concern is our vehicles, and we got to Ingram's Bayou, we anchored the boat, and then for what was it, 2.5 days, we sat and watched it get closer and closer and closer. So
I don't think we were there that long.
It was a period of days that we watched it get close to us. It wasn't like we were sitting there and all of a sudden the storm passed over. It was moving so slowly.
Yeah, the storm moved an average of 3 miles per hour.
Yeah,
it was
so
slow.
It creeped, and then it was just building. So it just sat on you once it got there. But the conditions, good 24, 48 hours before were already in the sustained 50s.
Yeah.
So there was no moving.
No,
You couldn't do
terrible.
anything. And there were no roads either. And there's no road access to Ingram Bayou.
Yeah.
And so you had to get in a 8.5-foot dinghy, inflatable little tiny boat.
Yeah, well, I've seen pictures of that baby.
Yeah,
with a 5 horsepower
engine.
outboard. And he went out with our car keys to meet somebody at Pirates Cove who drove down from Mobile. That was Jeffrey Cavanis.
Yeah,
nice. Jeffrey to the rescue.
Absolute legend. Jeff drove all the way to Pirates Cove, met Jayme, took the car keys, went to Mobile Yacht Club, and him and Josh Dupree at Mobile Yacht Club moved our cars to safety. Josh took them to his house.
Yeah,
that's
and
amazing.
So, absolutely. Yeah. And which Josh was really a VIP in this whole experience. I don't think he
filled up the tires. He topped my tires off too. That's a good man.
What a gentleman.
He's amazing. Absolute legend. Josh is one of the, what is his technical title? He's like, he does everything at Mobile Yacht Club. Waterfront coordinator?
I don't know.
Anyways, he
does everything.
Very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's also the sailing instructor for the club. So he's super knowledgeable about sailing. He's done all kinds of things on boats. And he actually kept contact with us through the entire thing all night. He didn't sleep.
Yeah.
And was kind of just being a sailing coach. And he was literally telling us, do this, do this, do this. Because we were so panicked and terrified. Like I couldn't eat. And just to even try and calm myself down, I was like taking Benadryl to try and like, I guess like a, I don't know, an anti-anxiety kind of thing, I guess. Just like taking Benadryls to try and keep myself from freaking out. But yeah, Josh was texting and being like, eat something, pack these things in a bag, make sure you've got this handy, get this stuff out. And was just like, just helping us think through it. Like we were having such a hard time, like just focusing and not panicking.
Well, I mean, like for everybody, like you guys weren't, I mean, you guys knew what you were doing, but you didn't really, really know what you were doing going into this. Like you weren't like these seasoned, this is your first like real storm, right? Like legit.
I would say yes. And I mean, most people have not gone through a hurricane on a boat. That's not something Josh had done either. He was just,
that's not in the manual.
Yeah.
No, nobody does that.
We wouldn't recommend
We would
it.
absolutely not recommend it. So
you don't have to do it.
How to go through a hurricane. Don't.
It just was that situation where we couldn't get off the boat, not safely. And Josh even said it's much safer to stay on the boat. He said, unless you're taking on water, do not leave that boat.
Yeah.
And so
it's the crazy thing about it is when we got there and the storm was coming closer, for hours and hours and hours, it just kept going slower and slower. And the conditions kept getting worse and worse. I mean, we were in conditions that would have been, at least in our minds, something we had never seen before, just completely out of the worst conditions we had ever seen. We were in those conditions for over 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, the boat was blowing around, like on the anchor, the boat's got a fixed point and it radiates around that fixed point. And even on the anchor, this is way before the hurricane had even made landfall. We're just flying around on the anchor and the boat is leaning over and swinging the other direction. We're seeing, gusts in the 60s and 70 knots, a wind, which is like 80 and 82 miles an hour. I mean, it's insane. And we've been up at this point, going on
sleep.
24 hours.
Terrifying.
We've not eaten anything because our nerves are so, and you can ask her, it takes a lot to really ruffle my feathers, to really make me nervous. I was in our bathroom holding the toilet like,
oh God.
I was so incredibly nervous. And for me, there came a point where I said, as the man of our little household, I've led my family into this situation. Not
Poor
that
Snooki. Poor Snooki.
Yeah,
Our
Suki
dog.
was with us.
Yeah,
Suki was on the boat.
Yeah, and
And there was no way to get her to anything to use the bathroom. That was also stressful.
And Morgan was very stressed out and very nervous and anxious. I was very stressed out and nervous and anxious, but I wanted to be calm. And there was just a point where I had no more calm left in me. I like broke down. And what was so crazy, and I have to really brag on Morgan, just how she handled the whole situation. There came a point where I broke down. Like, I just was so overwhelmed by the situation. The boat, I mean, you got to think the noise of the boat and the wind that we're experiencing at this point. You know, I'm on the VHF. I'm back and forth with all of our friends that are in the anchorage with us. And it's just getting worse and worse. And I can tell that they're more strained. Every time we talk to them, they're thinking, oh my goodness, this is way worse than what we were expecting it to be. And, you know, I had that moment where I just got so overwhelmed. And I'm literally about to vomit. My nerves and my anxiety was so high. And like I said, we hadn't eaten. We're tired. I just remember being in the bathroom and Morgan coming up with a wet bath cloth and just putting it over the back of my shoulders and neck. Saying, you're going to be okay. And it was the weirdest thing. And I would say without a doubt, it was the Holy Spirit. Just, I had a peace. And it was from that moment, my anxiety was still high, but I could swallow it and I could think and I could act. And it was just something about her presence and that calming effect that she had on me. And it was really crazy because that was even before, that was even hours before it got really, really bad. So some things that made it bearable for us, we found, we have a small generator that we can run. It's a little Honda generator. We had it on and we turned the air conditioner on.
He said, we're not going to be hot on top of this.
We
ran air conditioning the entire time.
If we're going to ride out a hurricane, we're going to be nice and chill.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, anything that we could have done to make ourselves
systems.
Yeah. You know, there was like 8 hours where we were in this really, really terrible weather leading up to it, but we just couldn't do anything. We just had to sit there. And we had a little GPS monitoring ourselves. And I was watching the track on the GPS to make sure we weren't dragging on our anchors. So I was watching our track. And as long as our track stayed in the same little radius, I was like, okay, we're good. I watched it for hours and hours and hours.
We were obsessed with watching the track. We kept it tracking for the entire time.
Yeah.
And we saved the track.
Yes.
It's really funny because you can hit play and like watch it do its thing and play it out in like a sped up thing. But when the storm actually hit, like to see what the boat was actually doing, it looks like it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be fascinating to see.
Dude, hey, I tell you what I want y'all to do. Will y'all make a screen recording of that and share it with us so we can put
I
it
can
with the
send
story?
you a video of it.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll post that. That's phenomenal. I'd love to see that.
He also had at one point a picture when we were in the eye wall. He took a picture of the radar with our dot on it for where we were in the eye wall.
Oh my God.
And so you've got like the eye, and then you've got the northeast is always the worst part on like an eyebrow is what it looks like. And we were smack dab in the eyebrow for 2 hours.
Yeah, it was if we would have tried to put ourselves in a worse spot, we could not have.
Worst thing. So, but
oh gosh.
Some people are just born sailors.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. So I feel like we're jumping like out of order in the story, but like the other thing for like while we were just waiting on it to hit, we watched all of the Back to the Future movies. We just like,
why not?
Back to the Future. Like,
why not?
We were like, let's do some like low anxiety, like just silly something.
Hey, Kyle Bashirs would be so proud of y'all. That's like one of his favorite movies.
Every single one. I mean, one after another. Back to the Future.
But what's crazy is even watching a movie where that's a lighthearted movie, right?
Yeah, we couldn't take tension in Back to the Future.
The tension of like, is Marty McFly going to be able to get the train 88 miles an hour?
This is like, just too much.
We would both be like, I can't breathe right now.
Oh my gosh. It's terrible.
It's like, even this is stressing me out. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what that I cannot fathom what you guys went through, but on the other side of it, you guys kind of looking back at what you went through together, what ways did it affect your marriage? Did it affect your relationship? Did it affect your faith? And kind of a reflecting type of conversation. What was that? What is that like for you guys?
Well, I'm gonna brag on Morgan again for a second. So when it really went down, I guess is the best way to say it. There was a point where
and this was in the middle of the night. It hit at like 2-3 a.m.
The eye wall hit.
Oh, sun's going down. It's getting dark. Oh my gracious!
It was 3 a.m. So it was pitch black. I've never seen or experienced anything like it. We started noticing a spotlight kept going flash through the porthole on our on the side of our boat. And I get on, I actually got on, we still had cell service, which was crazy to me. But I get on my cell phone and I text one of the guys, and he texts me back. And the two trawlers that we mentioned earlier were rafted up to the north of us.
Means tied together, like
they were anchored together with both of their anchors like tied, out in front of them. Mm-hmm. And they were getting really close to us, and it had gotten the conditions had deteriorated. It was terrible. The guy texted me and said, "Hey, I think we're moving. We're coming towards you guys." So at this point, we've got to. If you've ever get to the point where you have a ditch bag with survival stuff on your boat, you realize you're in a serious situation. But I can remember turning to Morgan and saying, "Hey, these guys think that they're dragging towards us. You need to put your gear on. You need to put your life vest on. Put a life vest on the dog." And I was putting all of my foul weather gear on and putting my vest on. Yeah. And I just told Morgan, I said, "We're going to crank the engine, and at least it'll be ready to go. If we need to try and avoid them, even while we're on the anchor, we'll have our engine on and we'll be ready." So I put my stuff on and I go outside. And again, without exaggeration, it's the eye wall is coming over us.
I mean, I'm just going to say I'm envisioning Lieutenant Dan in this moment on Forrest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it looks like. You weren't screaming at God at that moment.
No, we were in close communication with God this whole time. This is where we had church. Yeah, this is where we.
That's what I remember you telling me that. Well, we had some church in the bottom of that boat that night.
We had, and I don't want to gloss over this like I'm making a joke. I mean this earnestly. Mm-hmm. One of the most real times of true worship I've ever had in my life was sitting in the bottom of this boat, hanging on for dear life, and praying like I've never prayed before.
I have a Mars Hill playlist on Spotify of all the songs that y'all do at the church. And it was so loud outside, and just listening to it was just making it all that much more scary. And we put it on and just turned the volume full whack. I mean, as loud as our little speaker could go, and just tried to listen to that instead of the rain, the wind. Things were falling. The boat's meant to move, so we've got things stored so that they don't fall even under like normal conditions sailing, and stuff was falling everywhere. I mean, the boat was taking knockdowns, and which means it's leaning over like at least 45 degrees, and nothing was staying in place. And I literally was holding a pillow over my head. And that was when we started. They called us and said, "We think we're about to hit you guys." And
did they get close?
They were very close. They were probably a boat length away, like maybe 35 feet away. Yeah. When we finally said we got to do something, and he went outside. So
when I stepped outside, it defies description. Mm-hmm. I mean, I never in my life want to, but I've never in my life seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. The wind was blowing so forcefully that the surface of the water was like a vapor. The rain was blowing
like needles
so completely
skin, like
sideways.
It stung to be out in it.
You couldn't tell what was rain and what was water being picked up from the bay or from the bayou itself. I mean, everything was just getting sucked sideways. Mm-hmm. And the gusts were so violent, and it's kind of like the way the boat would move. It would move forward on the chain in a lull and just get slammed back in a gust. And
because surface level, it was swirling down through there. Like a hurricane is consistently coming from the same direction, but down in that little like bayou, it was moving in and zigzagging.
Mhm.
So it was flinging the boat around like some giant had the anchor chain and was just doing that.
So
it was all over the place.
We have instruments at the top of the mast that tell us wind speed. And the last wind speed I saw was triple digits. And then
it was knocked over.
It messed them up, so it couldn't read
anymore. Our wind reader completely sideways so that it was no longer reading. So we had no idea what the actual wind was. We couldn't see it anymore.
So I get into the cockpit, and when I say in the cockpit, I'm not like standing behind the helm like a man. I'm crouched down, holding on to the wheel of the sailboat.
You just staying low to not fall off the boat.
If you get hit in the face with a pine cone, you'd fly off the back of the boat. I mean, it was just, it was insane.
But we also, our life jackets have harnesses in them. And so we were also tethered to the boat.
I was clipped into the boat.
We brought out tethers to attach ourselves to the boat.
So bringing out the tethers, it's getting serious.
We're clipped to the steering column.
A family that tethers together.
Hey, there it is.
Weather's the weather.
Yeah.
But I get into the cockpit. The engine is cranked, and we can tell that these boats are coming towards us. And they're moving it's weird. If you ever see it, you just know it. But when a boat starts to drag, it moves completely different because it'll bounce forward and back on an anchor. But when it starts to drag, it stops moving around and it just starts.
It's like a free fall feeling. Like you kind of feel like your stomach goes. I don't know how to describe it.
So at this point, our anchor had held completely fine, which again, a true, honest miracle. I mean, it's amazing the forces and the loads that were put on our anchor chain and the anchor itself. But when I told Morgan to gear up and I geared up and I got into the cockpit, I mean, she just went into like this go mode, and it was like whatever we needed to do, she was ready to do it and I was ready to do it. And it was like, again, this crystal clear, just adrenaline, Holy Spirit kind of like clarity came over us. But we saw those boats coming towards us, and I've tried to figure out exactly what happened in this next 30 minutes.
A lot of things happened at the same time.
So by this point, it's like 4 a.m. We're in the biggest, worst part of the storm. I'm in the cockpit. So the first thing I can think to do is I put the boat in reverse, because I'm thinking, well, at very least I can put it in reverse, pull back on the anchor chain and move away from these two boats that were literally
and they could swing in front of us, hopefully.
Yeah, that they would be able to go past
us. Were hoping our anchor chain would be low enough below the water that they wouldn't catch us.
And I didn't want to wrap our own keel around the anchor chain. So I start just, if anything, I was like, maybe I can pull the anchor up and it'll reset farther away from them. So I'm like redlining the engine in reverse and like just trying to get away from them. And I cannot move our anchor at all. It won't budge. So at least I'm trying to get away from them. Was at a certain point, both of the boats just started going, like getting so close to us. And I don't know what happened, honestly. I remember putting the boat into forward and trying to drive away from them.
Yeah.
And it was like I drove away from them and I put some slack in the anchor chain and they came past us. And then when the boat
had that slack in it,
when the boat lengthened the chain back out and it pulled taut, the boat jerked. And we think that at this point, our anchor came loose. The bow of our boat came around and we faced straight at these other boats. I mean, literally we were facing bow to bow.
Just like passed. And then boom, it dropped back on it.
Yeah. And then I just threw the boat in reverse as fast as I could. And sometime during that point, the anchor bit back down again and we locked back down.
My goodness.
But we had moved.
We scooted over basically.
Yeah.
It was almost like if you had the anchor like in the center of the circle, it was almost like he went out to the side and pulled on it sideways and scooted it over and then sank back on it. Is best what I figure happened.
But we moved about 35 feet closer to the tree line.
Yeah, we got closer to the trees.
And I'm telling you right now, we had maybe a boat length between us and pine trees. And it was crazy. I mean, it was literally crazy. And essentially, we just were sitting there and I had the boat in forward. I was driving toward the anchor, just trying to ride through these gusts, thinking if we don't control the boat, we're going into the woods in our boat right now.
Which at the same time, we could see boats were in the woods.
Yeah.
So
one of our friends was in the woods.
Yeah, our friends on a 40-foot sailboat, they were up against the trees, and another sailboat was up against the trees. Mm-hmm. And there was the really big trawler that was in there with us. Best we can figure, his anchor started dragging, and we think he had his engines on, and we think his propeller cut our friend's anchor line. They had rope going to chain, and so to get their scope or the length that they wanted out, they had to have a rope in the water. And so we think it was cut because the end of their anchor line looked just like a clean cut, not that it broke. And so, yeah, they were up against the trees. That big trawler was doing kind of what we were doing, just motoring into it and sliding back, motoring into it and sliding back. Mm-hmm. And then our friends, like we said, we pretty much slid away from them, and then they looked like they grabbed again, right? Because they stopped moving.
They finally got it under control.
Yeah. And they had one of their boats has 2 engines and the other one has 1. So they had all 3 engines full blast, powering into it to try and help their anchor. Mm-hmm. And then ours dug back in, hard.
It was literally like it dug back in we had feet from us to these trees. It was unbelievable. I might be exaggerating this a little bit, but it felt like I could have jumped off the back of the boat and grabbed a pine tree. We were so incredibly close to them.
Wow.
But we've learned, I stayed at the helm, and essentially we learned when we could kind of throttle into the wind a little bit and keep the bow of the boat right into these gusts, and it didn't swing us around so much, and it kept us away from the trees. But you
had to go check the bow too.
Yeah, and I needed to check our anchor line and to make sure we weren't having chafe. But it got to this point where we were having to stand out in the storm on the anchor and just drive the boat through these gusts. Mm-hmm. And we did that for 2 hours?
2 hours.
So we've had no sleep for like 30 hours.
Pure adrenaline.
Standing, it was weird. I was standing out there. I was like, Morgan, I have to have something to eat.
Oh yeah.
So she's like right there up on the deck, right.
I had the flashlight, and I was trying to keep up with where the trees were. We were moving so much,
spotting trees,
that we were trying to keep up with where the trees were, so that we didn't accidentally send ourselves into them.
My gracious!
And so I was basically just trying to keep the flashlight on the trees and make sure we were far enough away.
But I remember just being.
I went inside and got. We had like a loaf of bread, and I went inside and I was just like, I just picked up some bread out of it and I just balled it up and just handed it to him like in a fist. And he's just like eating this bread ball, trying to stay at the wheel. And I think I handed you a carton of milk.
I just downed like half a gallon of milk.
Yes. You just started chugging milk and eating balled up bread.
I got so tired that she wound up having to take a shift, and she drove the boat for a little bit. For I don't know how long. I had to go forward and make sure that our anchor chain was still intact and that all of our lines weren't rubbing through. But, it's like once it finally settled down and we actually got the eye wall passed over us and we were in the center of the hurricane.
Yeah, we were in the cockpit when that passed over.
It really just went, and we just looked around.
It was like that.
Wow.
It was creepy. It was like, oh my goodness. And, everybody got on their phones and VHFs. Like, hey, everybody okay? Everybody okay? And we got a head count basically on everybody. And
the boats that were in the trees, the water was so deep that they were actually not touching bottom, even though they were brushing up against the trees. So they were just bouncing up against the trees, and they were able to come back out, and they had a backup anchor. So they reset. And then we were all like, okay, now what about the back end of this thing? Because, now we're about to have a complete wind change. And this to me was one of the I praise the Lord moments. We're watching it on radar. Yeah. And the storm starts falling apart. Like the back end of it was, a nice perfect circle. And all of a sudden the bottom of it just did that. Yeah. And it was, everybody just went to sleep. Yeah. It was just like this.
Immediately went
everybody
to sleep.
Goes, well, just fall over. We completely crashed. But it was like we were watching it because we were worried if it changed directions, we would swing into the trees this way. And so we were like, do we have to set this anchor again? Do we need to move it again? Which thankfully we didn't have to do that. We didn't even try for what we were seeing on the radar, but the anchor would not have come up. So there wouldn't have been anything we could have done at that point.
And I'll be honest, it was like we were in 100 knots of wind in these huge, crazy gusts, and the boat was laying over sideways. The deck was going underwater. And, you know, when the storm passed over the top of us and we were getting 60 knots from the other direction, we're just like, this is nothing. Let's go to sleep.
Yeah, when it started coming back down, we were like, that's fine. It's fine.
As long as it wasn't as long as it wasn't building.
Yeah, 40s and 50s, we were relieved
by
at that point.
It really was nothing. But I know that was a really long-winded way to get around to it. But kind of an answer to your question about, you know, the impact it had on our marriage, it's seeing you and your spouse like working as a team in that way. And just knowing that when it really came down to, I don't get to use this very often. I've never really used this in my life very often, but a life or death situation. I mean, we were really in a crazy situation. Absolutely. And just watching how she handled it and watching how she moved through that whole situation, even afterwards when, you know, it catches back up to you and you have to deal with how scary it was. But, you know, if I would have been in that myself, I don't know what I would have done, first of all. But even just having a second set of hands and having someone who's capable, it really was, it was an amazing experience. And to say that we've gone through something like this, I don't want to go through anything like this. I would never wish anything like this on anybody, but
I guess I'd be lying. Confidence that it gives you.
I'd be lying if I wouldn't say that. It kind of fills you with this confidence in a weird sort of way. You know, there were things we could have done different, but then there was a lot of things that we couldn't change. And given the situation that we had, you know, I'm extremely proud of her. I'm proud of myself for what we were really blessed to make it through and to have that experience and to have been safe through it.
It makes me think about the passage of scripture that he says that two are better than one, right? You know, a guy by himself, a traveler by himself can, you know, basically be waylaid, but if he has an extra set of eyes, you know.
And it was like we were blessed to not be at the, I guess, complete losing it point at the same time. Like it was
out that way.
It was gracefully staggered. Like that was just one of those mercies that I didn't, you know, I guess I'd never really thought about that before, you know, but like when he had his moment, I somehow was able to bolster and, you know, encourage. And then he would, you know, get it together, and then I would have a moment, and then he could, you know, encourage. And so it was like we trade off, be like, all right, you freak out, I'll hold the ship down.
We'll hold it together.
My turn to freak out, you hold the ship down.
Kind of reminds me of my wife and I whenever we had a 1 month old.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, hurricanes and kids.
There's a lot of similarities there.
Oddly similar.
We said this has got to be the closest thing to having a newborn.
What's Suki doing during all this?
This has to be similar.
Yeah. So the dog was trembling on our bed.
We had to just pack pillows around her and stick her in a safe spot.
But I felt so bad for her. I'll be honest with you. I thought very little about the dog actively. She was down below and like made sure the dog was good. And that's another thing too, is I know she's a dog. She's just a dog, but she's important to us. But the fact that I didn't have to think about the safety of the dog, I could focus on what I needed to focus on. And Morgan could focus on the things she needed to focus on. I mean, just splitting that mental load up was really, I don't know, just it's a beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing when you see your relationship get tested in such a visceral, physical way. To come out through an experience like that, it's really unique. To say it any other way would, I don't know how to put it, just very unique experience.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like, you know, we don't always we don't always want trials in our life. We don't always want difficulties, but man, when God brings us through something, it's nice to know that we can make it through hard things.
Yeah. And humbling in the truest sense. I mean, I don't know, you read about, these, especially these Old Testament stories where these men, these prophets, whoever had these like swallowed by a whale, those kind of experiences. I just don't think in my life I've ever been truly brought face to face with how really helpless I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we're honest, you're truly that helpless all the time. I think we have a lot of things that we think are safety nets for us.
Yeah.
But man, it just ripped down every shred of a supposed safety that I had, that she had. It was very, very, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like, I don't want to make it seem like we're thrill seeking. We want to go through experiences like that, but it's like, you just feel so incredibly alive. Is that the right way to put it? Like when you're in that kind of moment, it's terrifying, and it's nothing can describe it.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of the anxiety was about just, worrying about the boat itself, and how it was almost like and I think we both came to this point at different points, to this, all right, Lord, if you take this boat, you take this boat.
It's just a thing.
Please help us
through
this. But if we lose the boat, it's okay.
Yeah.
And just to say, that's not really the end of the world.
We really had to act it. So the point where I was heaving in our toilet, that was the point I feel like I was coming to. We had to pray and actively say, God, we surrender this boat to you. We just ask that you keep us safe. That's all it's just a thing. We don't care about that.
And that greatly reduced the anxiety, just to let that go.
Letting go of
just
something.
To say,
letting go of something you're worried about that you already cannot control.
Right.
The safety of the boat, the safety of me and Morgan. Like, we can't control those things, and actively going through a process of saying, you know what, we surrender these things to you. It was a palpable physical weight that was lifted off of us. And it was like, at that point, we were fine for the rest of the storm.
Yeah. That's good. There was something you said that I wanted us to kind of circle back to, that I really a couple of points that I really liked. You're talking about how when you make decisions, you kind of have to stick to it. When you're living on a sailboat, how is that? This experience, so to speak, and that mentality also, maybe found its way into other parts of your life when it comes to decision making in your life. Do you take a lot more time to evaluate things, or you're slower to make decisions, and go, all right, well, when we do this, we're going to stick to it? Is that something that has come about as a part of you being sailors, or whatever you want to your term yourself?
I think
Nurseman. Thank you. Yes.
I think we've gotten a lot of practice with problem solving, and I think that, a lot of times when you're trying to make a decision about something, you kind of got to track it out and see, where you think this is going to go. And I don't know that, I don't know. How do you?
I guess that it's really made me think personally a lot about what actually happens when we make these decisions. And so to me, it's like when you make a decision, it's like you're setting this trajectory, right? You make a decision and, this trajectory is set. And there are things you can do to adjust that. But if your decision-making is good and your thought process is sound, that trajectory is going to be better, aimed at what you want to accomplish. And I guess it's crazy to me, because a lot of times the problem that I tend to have in decision-making is less about the trajectory of what that's going to lead to, and more of just, okay, there's all these options. So instead of something moving in a forward progression that has some momentum, I can get bogged down with, well, we could do any one of a million things. And I think that's what's crazy to me is the idea of those, the control that you have being stripped away. I think that sometimes it just takes that initial forward momentum, because when things are going crazy, you're making these decisions, you're not thinking about 100 different options. And, just like if you make a decision, like I said, it's like it sets a trajectory. And I think the beautiful thing about it is a lot of times it's just taking that first step. I know we tend to think about like prayerfully making decisions, thinking, okay, this is the goal, right? This is where we want to go. And a lot of times you can do that so much, but you never take a step. And I would say in most cases, any decision, even if it's small, you have to take a step on faith.
Yeah.
I think it's just really shown us that even a decision that had poor outcome, let's just say, or a decision where you didn't have all of the information, that still making that decision and setting that trajectory, knowing that we are, children of God and that we have somebody who's guiding us. I don't know, it takes the pressure off of us. We want to think about it. We want to go through things prayerfully. We want to go through things with a level head, but at the end of the day, something else is guiding us, and we have something outside of ourselves to rest and lean into. And I think that's a big thing with the boat is in a very physical way, you make a decision and you deal with those consequences. And it's just like that with everything in life, really, or the big decisions, for sure.
One of the things we always love to ask our guests, and I know you guys have already had some adventures after the hurricane, because I enjoyed following your photos from when you went out west and visited some of the parks that are on my list to go and visit. But what's your next adventure? Obviously, the hurricane was not on the list of, hey, we'd love to do this.
That's not a bucket list item.
It was on the list. We checked it off.
It wasn't on there, but you got it checked off. But what's on the horizon for the Snellgroves coming up?
Well, in the next week or maybe 2 weeks, hopefully just a week, we are setting sail from Tampa, heading south, and we're heading for the Bahamas. Yeah. So
awesome.
We're taking the boat to the Bahamas.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's the biggest trip we've ever done on the boat. So we brought it from Mobile to Tampa Bay, and now we're going to go from Tampa Bay to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
We expect to be able to spend, well, that's the thing is we kind of don't know, possibly up 4 months or more. I've been able to take travel nurse contract work. She's been able to take off work. We've saved up, and we're basically, as long as we've got time or the money to continue doing it, we'd like to continue to do it. And then we'll see what happens when we come back. There's only so many things we can plan ahead on. We just know the next step, we're going to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
There you go. Brian, wow. Jayme is also a fisherman. He loves to do some fishing. So I'm sure that there will be some fishing going on when you get down there.
Oh yes.
I hope so.
I want to meet the fish where they are. I want to dive below the surface and stab a fish.
All right. There it is.
That's one of my goals.
Well, let us know how that goes. We'll have to do a recap of where are they now whenever your trip is over.
Well, if my fishing underwater is anything like my fishing above the water, it'll be about as successful. So, which is not very.
Well, that's why they call it fishing, not catching.
Not catching.
Man.
Well, guys, thank you all so much for taking this time. This is a fascinating story, and I kind of have quasi followed you guys through Brad, knowing that what happened in 2020 happened, and then being able to meet you guys in person is just a real treat. And our listeners, I know that they're going to be fascinated with this, and just thank you for sharing, and thank you for the time that you've taken with us tonight.
Yeah, and just I guess one thing to add about a blessing in disguise. Sally was really the catalyst for us having the guts to go, you know. It was so easy to stay in Mobile and keep doing what we were doing. And we were just scared to pull that trigger and cast off dock lines. But thinking about Sally and what, you know, how close it came to just being all, you know, off the table, we were like, let's go for it. So
that's great.
Sally was really the big thing that was like, let's just go ahead and start moving, because what are we waiting for? So,
well, I know I certainly enjoy following on both of your Instagram accounts and the stories and the adventures of the Snellgroves. And you know, we didn't really mention it all that much, but I love the fact that your name is Morgan and we can call you Captain Morgan.
Yeah. Everybody at the yacht club calls me.
I love it.
You got to embrace it. I love it so much. But now we'll be sure to share that those Instagram accounts, and look forward to seeing what the Bahamas looks like from afar and vicariously living through the Snellgroves on their journey to the Bahamas. And
can't wait to see the spearfishing photos.
I know.
Yeah, I can't wait.
You should invest in a GoPro before you do you have like an underwater GoPro action?
We do have a GoPro.
I got a GoPro and I got
I said we got a drone for Christmas.
I got a drone for Christmas.
Oh my goodness.
Honestly, yeah. So prayer request.
To not
pray that I don't send the drone into the water.
We don't want that to go into the drink, huh?
No.
Yeah, that would be no bueno.
No bueno. Well, thank y'all for taking time to join us, and man, we always thank the folks that take time to listen.
For sure.
A lot of folks that we love telling stories that are the untold stories, you know, because some of those are the best stories. You know, a lot of people may have watched Sally unfold, but to hear you guys this story and to hear what it was like to go through, that's really cool for people that would never experience that. So I'm thankful for you guys to be able to share that with our listeners and share that with us consequently. And we're thankful for the people that do listen. There are a lot of faithful listeners and encouraged by these stories and challenged by these stories. Maybe they needed to hear this story to go, you know what, maybe it's time to cast off our lines and go to whatever that means in their own lives. And, you know, everyone goes through their own proverbial storms. You know, maybe they're not as visceral as Hurricane Sally, but everyone's been in the midst of, you know, struggle and storm and terrified and, you know, losing it and their partner holding it together or their husband holding it together. And we've all experienced those moments of being offset. And I love that picture of marriage. One of the reasons we see why marriage is really important, because we need one another, you know, to go through those kinds of storms like that. To be solitary would have been really terrifying, but to have one another is such a blessing. I love seeing that in y'all's story. So maybe there's somebody listening that they needed to be reminded of that, and I'm thankful for that in you guys' story. There are a lot of people that are really gracious to support us. One of the best ways you can support us is by leaving a review, and the best way to share it is to share this podcast with somebody. Maybe you know someone who lives on a sailboat. Maybe you know that other person because you guys were the people that I know that lived on a sailboat. But maybe you know someone else that would love to hear this experience. Share this with somebody, and ultimately that these stories would inspire folks to share their own adventures, write their own stories. I love that you guys got to tell this story. So now that this story has been told and it's been recorded, and you guys will be able to say, you know what, if you want to hear about this story, you can go listen to the Storied Outdoors and you can hear us tell the story.
I didn't even thought of that.
And that's really one of our ultimate goals.
That's how a podcast works. You guys should do a podcast.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. Join the ranks of the podcast. Share stories. That's what this is all about. Building community, telling stories that we can reflect back on those stories and learn from them. So we hope that does this for people, is to share their own stories, their own adventures, in what we love to call the Storied Outdoors.